We had a good meeting this morning of the Incident Response Group, discussions with ministers. I made some phone calls to Indigenous leadership as well as to a number of premiers. I understand how worrisome this is for so many Canadians and difficult for many people and families across the country. We're going to continue to focus on resolving this situation quickly and peacefully, and that's what we're going to do.
One of the blockades coming up is don't focus.
The Prime Minister, as you saw there, emerged from an emergency cabinet meeting this afternoon, insisting he's hopeful for a peaceful resolution to end the blockades that are halting rail traffic across the country. The most disruptive of those blockades is in Eastern Ontario.
This is serious, and we need to start waking up about our earth and the people's First Nations people.
I want people to understand that the First Nations were the first people here, and people need to respect that always. That, like I said, they were the first people here. We discovered the land, so it's just we need to defend this. We're just for defending our place of where we all originated, I guess.
I think it's really sad. I feel like these people don't want to be out here. I think everybody kind of wants to be at home. It's family day. That's where they should be. Nobody wants to be sitting in a cold tent on the side of a railroad track, but unfortunately that's what we feel like they need to do. So.
The rail blockade on Tyendinaga Mohawk territory near Belleville, Ontario, is now in its 11th day. It's one of several blockades in the country set up in support of BC's Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs who are fighting the construction of a natural gas pipeline through their territory. As a result, Via Rail has cancelled almost all of its train lines in the country, and CN Rail has shut down its entire Eastern Canada network. Ontario Provincial Police also reported a new protest today. A group of about 40 people blocked a bridge between Canada and the United States near Brockville, Ontario. They're reportedly connected to the group in Tyendinaga. There was a huge backup, as you can see there, on the nearby Highway 401, one of Canada's busiest highways, of course. After a 3-hour protest, though, the bridge was reopened. So what happened in today's meeting between the Prime Minister and members of his cabinet, and what does the government plan to do next? Earlier I spoke. Hi, Minister Garneau, thanks for making time for us.
My pleasure.
Minister, leaving the meeting I believe you were part of earlier today, the Prime Minister said we're going to, quote, continue to focus on resolving the situation quickly and peacefully. What does that mean?
Well, quickly, because there is a large economic impact, not only on the railways, but also on their customers and also on Canadians. And we want to do it through dialogue because we feel that that's the best approach. That dialogue has started, and we realize that it has to proceed at a certain pace, but that's the approach we're taking right now because we want to resolve this for the long term.
Can you be specific when you say dialogue with what you mean? So we know that, for example, Mark Miller was meeting with various leaders in Tyendinaga over the weekend. We also know that there was maybe going to be some meetings between Minister Bennett and Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs. Has that happened? Like, where is the dialogue right now?
Okay, so the dialogue is continuing by both of the ministers. And what I mean by dialogue is something which may sound very, very obvious, but it implies that both sides are listening to each other very, very carefully. And this is an extremely important thing to take into consideration. When the First Nations are speaking to Minister Miller or Minister Bennett, it is extremely important that we give them the chance to say what they want to say. And in this case, there are things that are being said that go back 150 years in terms of concerns that they have expressed. So we're not just talking about the immediate issue at hand right now and the cause for the current blockades, but it's important as part of that dialogue that we listen very carefully to all of the background. And then we start to talk about, well, how can we resolve this?
Okay, but I just want to be specific. Has Minister Bennett actually met with any of the hereditary chiefs in BC?
She has had conversations with them, and Mr. Miller was, of course, near the Belleville at the Tyendinaga Mohawk meeting on Saturday. But the dialogue is happening on both sides.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, though, is there additional dialogue, actual meetings slated to take place? I'm asking because I'm just trying to ascertain for our viewers if things are actually moving ahead or if things are where they stand.
Yes, things are moving forward in the sense that more dialogue is planned. So the initial dialogues have occurred. We need to continue that dialogue, and things went well enough that we're going to be able to continue that because that is ultimately the purpose of this, and on both sides. Both sides want to resolve this.
And when is that dialogue scheduled for?
I can't give you a precise time. Minister Bennett's office is looking at that side of it, and Minister Miller looking at his dialogue with the Mohawks.
We've heard from leaders in both places that they want to meet individually or specifically with the Prime Minister. Is that being considered?
Those are all things that are being considered, but I can't confirm that at this particular point in time.
And when you talk about the economic impact, obviously given your portfolio, you must be well acquainted with what that impact is. Can you quantify it for us at all at this point?
Yes, I mean, the amount of merchandise that is moved by trains is enormous in this country. And at the moment, CN is essentially at a standstill in the eastern part of Canada, in other words, east of Toronto. The impact of that, and CP is affected to a lesser extent. We're talking about $120 million a day of merchandise that would be moved on a normal day over the rail lines that are currently stopped. That doesn't mean the impact is $120 million, but that's to give you an idea of how much merchandise moves just on that part that is stopped at the moment. And if you sort of go down into details about some of the products, we're certainly aware of the fact that there are products like chlorine, which is used for water purification, propane, which is used in a variety of applications, including with farmers for drying grain, and certain other products are going to be in the not too distant future in very, very short supply. We're also aware of the fact that in the cases of some companies, which are customers that make products that go on the trains, that they're going to have to lay off people because they're stockpiling too much stuff and they can't get it on the trains. CN and VIA have both announced layoffs, temporary layoffs. So we know that the impact is very serious and very large, and so hence why we want to resolve this as quickly as possible. But we believe that this can be best done through dialogue.
Let me just ask you, though, given what you've just laid out, and I do take your point on dialogue, at what point does the government and cabinet sort of look at the situation, look at the enormity of what you just laid out, those statistics that you just laid out, and say, okay, this needs to something needs to change? Is there a point at which, or does this dialogue continue in perpetuity?
Well, no, the dialogue continues as long as we feel that there is a chance and we're making progress. I mean, that's the essence of any dialogue for any particular subject, that we are actually moving forward and there's a real chance of success. But we can't do it forever. So I'm sorry I can't be more specific, but that is the current situation at the moment.
I guess I'm just thinking, if I'm putting myself in the shoes of somebody who is shipping those goods or set to receive them or wants to export them, if they're looking to the government to find out, okay, how long might I be in this situation, are they unable to get an answer?
Well, obviously, it would be nice for them to be able to get a very specific answer, but we can't do that at this point. All I can say is that we're making progress on the dialogue. We want to advance it. We want to resolve this as quickly as possible, and we can't wait forever because the impact is going to be felt right across the country as it already is being felt.
How do you know that you're making progress? And I ask because there's another blockade today, for example. So how do you know that progress is actually taking place? And why should Canadians just trust you?
Well, because Ministers Miller and Ministers Bennett, who are very experienced, have told us that there are some positive indications as we are moving forward. I can't be more specific about what was discussed this morning, but that there is a sense that our efforts to continue that dialogue are going to be worthwhile. And Vassy, if I may add one additional thing, because I think it's important to point it out, I have concerns with respect to safety here. There have been instances with the railroads where people have climbed on railway cars. That happened over the weekend. There have been instances where an unexpected blockade was put in an area where a train was in fact operating, and the railway company was not aware of that. And that can be extremely dangerous when a train is coming along. You know, the trains in Canada are long. They're big, they're heavy, they're large, they can't stop on a dime. And there have also been instances of tampering as well on the railways. And one that concerns me particularly is disabling the signalization, the signaling that occurs at a road crossing. So these are things that I would urge Canadians. We accept peaceful protests in this country and demonstrations that are peaceful and lawful, but it is concerning if people aren't respecting the fact that they can not only injure themselves, but they can injure other people. So I would ask Canadians to be sensible on the issue of railway safety.
All right, thank you very much, Minister Garneau. Appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you, Vashi.
Opposition parties are calling on Justin Trudeau to resolve the issue. What do they make of the Prime Minister's meeting today? And how would their parties handle the blockades? Joining me now is Conservative multiculturalism critic Garnet Jenis and NDP House Leader Heather McPherson. Hi, both of you. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming in. Mr. Jenis, let me start with you because your party has very specifically said these blockades are illegal. The Prime Minister needs to end them. How?
Well, the Prime Minister needs to, as he's empowered to, ask the Public Safety Minister to, through the RCMP Act, direct the RCMP to enforce the law. The escalation continues every day these go on. It's started as a relatively small number of people, and the law should have been enforced. The law should be enforced. And I think it's important to bring it back as well to the cause of this. You have a pipeline project on the West Coast, which has the support of all of the affected elected councils. And there are some folks who think that a small number of hereditary chiefs should overrule the will of the elected
that goes back
Indigenous
to be
people
fair,
who have
that
a
goes
right
back
to
to a
develop.
debate in sort of the way the laws have been structured in this country around who has jurisdiction over what. Like, it's not as clear cut, not even in the courts.
But I would hope that all members of Parliament would accept the principle that Indigenous people have a right to elect their own leaders and to express through democratic elections their desire to develop or not. But in this case, all of the elected councils are saying, let's move forward. And yet you have a lot of people who are not from those affected communities who are openly talking about shutting down Canada and are having devastating economic consequences.
Just to be clear, though,
Yeah.
you want the Prime Minister to order the RCMP to go in and physically remove these protesters? I mean, the OPP has an injunction that would allow them to do so, and they're not because it's going to escalate things.
Well, as you've seen, and as we've seen on your show today, the escalation is happening as a result of the government's inaction. I think we both agree, certainly, that the Prime Minister being away, not addressing the situation, we probably disagree on how to resolve it. But no, I mean, I think it's important in a rule of law country that the Minister of Public Safety gives the direction to the RCMP to enforce the law. The escalation is happening because of the failure of the government to engage. And you can't expect in every case you have people breaking the law that you can just talk them out of breaking the law. That's not how a rule of law country functions.
Ms. McPherson, what do you think? I know that you wanted you said last week on the show that you wanted the Prime Minister to come back to deal with this, and now your party is calling on him to himself meet with, for example, the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs. What do you think that would accomplish?
Well, there's a few things. First of all, absolutely he should be meeting. This is nation to nation. This is on unceded territory. One of the things that I just really want to make very, very clear, too, and I think you agree with this as well, is that there is a structure within the First Nation groups to have hereditary chiefs and to have band chiefs. And to be able to say that only one is sort of representative of those populations is really problematic. I don't think you actually do think that.
Though the NDP
we do
in
need
BC said, Premier Horgan said they have to work it out for themselves.
And so we need to give them the space to do that. I mean, we need to take the RCMP out. We need to stop escalating this. We need to stop getting in the way of this community making a decision for themselves, because they have not made that decision, and we need to give them the space to do that.
How much space are you willing to give them?
But you know what? If we had started these conversations some time ago, like if the Prime Minister had actually met with them at the beginning, had actually taken the leadership role, had actually made the point of having that nation-to-nation discussion, had actually taken the time to go there, who knows where we'd be right now. You know, the idea that we are facing escalation is really, really significant. We could be in a situation where we could be seeing RCMP officers dragging people off the land, dragging people. This is the thing.
To be fair, I mean, the
Canada
government
doesn't
has
wanna see.
resisted that, right? And so far, today they all came out, and even we just had Minister Garneau on, and he's saying, no, we're choosing dialogue as the path forward. My question, I guess, is, I take your point on how we arrived here, and I think there are questions for both the federal government and the provincial government and NDP government in BC about that. But at the same time, we are here, and so as a result, how much time are they supposed to give them or space to work it out if there's $150 million of goods that are sent on rail cars every day in this country, now halted?
But I think giving them the space to make that decision is not the same thing as getting people to step back from the blockades. I think if we were actually, if they felt that they were being heard, if they felt that their government was listening to them, that there would be that opportunity to do that. I mean, we listened to the minister. Nobody has actually gone to meet with the hereditary chiefs. He's very vague in this sort of idea that, yes, conversations have happened. I mean, that's all we have. It's not enough. I know that Peter Julian from the NDP has called for an emergency debate in the House. We should be talking about this. We should be moving this forward. But as much as I am deeply concerned about goods traveling by rail, I'm deeply concerned about rail workers and their families. I just think we have to actually let people have the opportunity to protest. It's a fundamental right in Canada.
Mr. Genis?
Just a few points. I think the idea of an emergency debate in the House of Commons is a great idea. That's up to the Speaker, but I hope we'll have that opportunity. I think it'll be worthwhile to have that conversation. The majority of the hereditary chiefs of the communities that are impacted by this particular project are in favor of the project as well. So, I mean, I
don't think that's true.
But the elected hereditary chiefs didn't matter.
So first of all, I think we should all be committed to the principle that it is the elected representatives should have the final say on behalf of the people that elect them.
I think the reason that there's concern about that is because that system of elected officials was set up by the Indian Act, right?
Well, I mean, the Indigenous people should have a right to elect their own representatives. That's not just an artifact of the Canadian system. That's part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 18. We either believe that, and we believe that applies to Indigenous people, or we don't. But I think it's notable, and from what I've read, a majority of the hereditary chiefs of all of the communities affected by this project are also
outside of
in favor of within the broader Coastal GasLink project. So But the vast majority of the people that are involved in these blockades are not even from these communities. There's blockades being set up all over the country by some Indigenous people, some non-Indigenous people that are openly saying they want to shut down Canada. And I just think, what kind of a country are we going to be? Are we going to say that every time people are breaking the law, protesting illegally, this isn't about a right to protest, every time people are breaking the law, doing dangerous activity, do we say, well, we have to talk them out of doing that? Or do we say, well, ideally, we would talk them out of it, but we've got to enforce the law at some point.
And events that have happened in the past with, for example, even just the OPP, can you sympathize and empathize with the idea that the government doesn't want to go in, send the RCMP in, and escalate things further, and perhaps things get violent?
Well, I mean, we're seeing such a dramatic escalation. Essentially, so much of our rail system in this country has been shut down. There is a big risk to people's safety, as the minister spoke about. I think we are seeing further escalation as a result of inaction by the government. And I think, enforcing the law when people are engaging in dangerous, illegal blockades, putting themselves and others at risk. I hope the Liberals and the NDP would say at some point we have to enforce the law. And I don't know what that point is for them, but surely we can't expect that in a country this large with this many people that you have to convince every single person to agree with you.
I have less than a minute, so I want to give Ms. McPherson.
The only thing I would just say is that, surely we also need to recognize that this is the result of some deeply colonial things that have happened. This is the result of a failure of leadership by this government, a failure to recognize the important relationship with Indigenous people. This is not something.
But I mean, it's not fair to say they've done nothing in that respect, is it?
Well, they've sued kids. They've done a number of things. They have
claim they're
not
settle that, but yes.
lived up to their obligations to First Nations people, and this is a consequence. And yeah, they're not all from the same area of the country, but they all do represent this First Nations voice that has been ignored for so long that what we're seeing is an eruption. And historically, if we don't understand that historically you don't drag people away from these protests because it escalates things, we really haven't learned our lesson.
I got to go. I'm out of time. I'm sorry. Thank you very much to both of you for your time this evening. Really appreciate it. Conservative MP Garnet Jennett and NDP MP Heather McPherson. The rail blockade on Tyendinaga Mohawk territory near Belleville, Ontario is now entering its 11th day. It's one of several blockades in the country set up in support of BC's Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs who are fighting the construction of a natural gas pipeline on their territory. As a result, Via Rail has canceled almost all of its train lines in the country, and CN Rail has shut down its entire eastern Canadian network. The CBC's Olivia Stefanovich has been leading our coverage from the Tyendinaga blockade, speaking to people on site. Hi, Olivia. What are you hearing from those you're speaking to?
Well, Vashi, there is a willingness among the Mohawks I've been speaking with to come to an agreement with the federal government about this demonstration behind me. As you say, it's been going on for more than 10 days now, but the Mohawks are clear. Their demand is that they want to see RCMP leave Wet'suwet'en territory in northern BC, and this has put the federal government in a tough spot because the federal government says it does not direct police operations. Now, we did see RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki at the meeting with the Prime Minister and his key cabinet ministers earlier today in Ottawa. And we do know that Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller, when he visited the community of Tyendinaga over the weekend, he did speak to the Mohawks about this issue in BC, and he did tell them that he would fast track that issue and try to come up with some solution. Now, the Mohawks, they are dug into their position here, but they do see this sense of dialogue, the fact that the minister has come here to Tyendinaga and that the federal government is trying to establish a conversation with them as a positive thing. And they do think that the fact that the Prime Minister called an emergency meeting today, they do think that it's positive as well, Vashi. I had the chance to speak earlier with a family that came here today to visit the camp. There was a grandfather and 3 of his grandsons. They're partially Mohawk. And I want to play you some clips from them now about what they think Ottawa can do about all of this.
I think Justin should come down here and talk to all of the First Nations and have a meeting and figure this out.
Start talking and stay with the dialogue, right? And don't change it 10 years from now or next year so we're all back out here again. We should all be at home with our families instead of everybody standing out on this side street here.
So there is a consensus, Vashi, among the Mohawks here that they do want the conversation that's been opened up with Ottawa to continue. And it is important to note also that this demonstration here is not just about what's happening in BC. The Mohawks also have their own historical grievances with Canada, which they want Ottawa to address, such as a land dispute. So they want this all to end peacefully, somehow with some sort of agreement, just as much as the federal government does. Vashi?
All right, thanks very much for that update, Olivia. The CBC's Olivia Stefanovich near Belleville, Ontario. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.